Hi Mackenzie, my name is Pierce. I'm a second year student at UVic, and I'm very happy that you agreed to come in today.
Yeah, of course, thanks for having me.
And we want to talk about how arts and culture build community, like the role of culture in building communities. And Scott over there is a planning student at UNBC, and he says it's great to see other young people in politics and just having this generation bring itself forward and participate in the election process.
I completely agree.
And we're posting this on Facebook and any other formats we can.
Sounds good.
First of all, what made you decide to run for political office?
Well, the first thing that brought me to being interested in political office was forestry practices. Because I am studying forestry, I was learning in school about sustainable forestry practices and what we should be doing. And then when I went out to work during the summers and my friends were working in the bush during the summers, they were seeing the exact opposite happening of what we were being taught in school. And the only way to change that is with policy. It's hard to change the rules when you're on the ground as a forester in the bush. And the only place you can't do that is if you are changing policy. And how do you change policy? Well,
Government.
Exactly. You either advocate to your current politicians to change what the practices are, or you run for office. So that's what enticed me to run. And then what kept me when I learned about the Green Party was how they don't whip their votes. They bring young people to the table and they encourage people to have a voice. They are extremely passionate about keeping the other parties accountable and what the benefit is to bringing Greens to the table and how we do politics differently. We don't heckle, we don't bring other people down. We are focused on bringing positive change to our communities, and if that means supporting a bill put forward by another party, if it has the best interest of our community in the bill, we will support it even if we don't get the credit, as long as we're making sure that it follows our values and everyone's opinion is in the bill and making sure that it's for the best interest. We will support it. And the other parties have a hard time with supporting other people's bills if they're not getting the credit. So we really want to do politics differently, and that's what kept me with the Green Party and enticed me to run again.
I'm glad to hear that. One thing here, especially in McBride, because we're a forestry, natural resources sort of community, is how does culture play a role in enhancing our connection to nature and the environment and working with resources and things like that?
I think in industry towns it can be quite divided sometimes, because there can be a lot of people that are very pro-industry and that's their livelihood, and there can be some people that are very against it, and I think culture can bring people together. Exactly. I think culture can be that bridge that helps people understand, the beauty of our environment and artists and music, and those things can bring us all together and make sure that, we don't have a divide in our community, and we're making sure that we are allowing diverse voices to be heard in our community, and we're respecting everyone regardless of their views on certain things. And a lot of the time culture and arts brings forward an aspect of industry that is sometimes forgotten. People that are artists, a lot more of the time are passionate about protecting and preserving our environments, and because they're documenting it, they're writing songs about it, they're in the in the bushes all the time, painting beautiful pictures that I see behind you and things like that. So I think that it can bring us together and make sure that everyone's views are heard, and it is extremely important for every community to have a center like this, to be able to let artists thrive and make sure that we're not just focusing on just our natural resource industry or just extracting, that we're also making sure that we're protecting some of these areas that are so important, like the ancient forest that isn't so far away.
Yeah. And here in the Whistle Stop Gallery, like everything in here is made by people who live in the community or in Valemount or Dunster or Dome Creek. And today we're in a throwaway society where we buy things and chuck it. And what ways can we government, how can you support local artisans and artists?
Sure. I think a great example is this shop itself. and how it's supporting seniors and to have a little bit extra pay and local artists. I think that that's a perfect example, and if we can make sure that centers like this are thriving in every community, we can make sure that local artists have a place to thrive so that they're not leaving, they're not going to other places where.
And if McBride, this town of 500 people, can have something like this,
exactly,
why can't Prince George has something like this, but other small towns in BC?
Exactly. So I think that we, as government, as politicians, we can make sure that we're not just focused on large corporations and those that can heavily influence our decisions when we are elected. We need to also make sure that we're talking with local artisans and going to the gift shops and not just meeting with the CEOs of large companies and having that be our campaign plan, and make sure that we're not just stopping at the places where we can either get the most money or, we need to do politics differently, like I was talking about before, and connect back with people that are passionate about not just the throwaway society and people that are passionate about the 3 R's and reducing and creating locally and foraging and hunting and gathering again and getting back to our roots and making sure that we have safe and healthy ecosystems so that we are able to go out into
and produce
our
locally
wilderness
and use the resources we have in our communities.
Exactly.
Instead of shipping them out to
very passionate about
foreign countries and buying them back later.
Exactly. That is one of my top priorities in creating a sustainable forest industry that I focus on a lot, is the banning the export of raw logs and keeping our jobs local.
Because that hurt McBride and all the communities on the way to Prince George 20 years ago when they all shipped out.
All of those mills are now closed. They were small mills. And a great example is James, who runs the Stop the Spray BC Facebook page. He's actually a woodworker, and he wants to create local small mill products, right? Like specialty products. And the hoops that he has to jump through to be able to use waste wood that they consider waste wood and aspen that is left on blocks, that is cut down and then left, for him to be able to use that, he has to apply for a permit, even though it's just sitting there as waste. And the permits that he has to apply for, of course you're not going to entice people to be using what's in their backyard when they have to go through such hoops to be able to make a bowl out of an aspen tree that is in their backyard, but they're not allowed to go get it because of all the strict policy that is put in place to benefit large companies. So we need to make sure that we have politicians that understand that are advocating for smaller forestry companies, whether that be a woodworking company or a small pellet plant, to use the slash piles that are already cut down that are sitting out there to create local jobs and make sure that we're not harvesting old growth. That this came out in the news yesterday, harvesting old growth to create pellets, but we're figuring out a different use for the slash piles that we don't want to burn, but they're already cut down. What can we do with them? Well, we can offset coal by creating pellets. So and helping other countries do that, because carbon doesn't stay in a country's border. We're all breathing in the air in this country, and we are in this world, and we need to make sure that we're all doing our best to help with that. So
all right, thank you. Another question. In your opinion, how does investing in culture benefit rural communities?
Sure. A great example, I don't know him very well, but Seth McDonald, I believe his name is, lives in Dunster, and he hosted a music festival, I believe, and that's, I think, a perfect example. And last year Wells was in my riding, and so I got to travel for our Wells Festival, and I think that those are great examples of culture and art and artists that get to come together and what benefit it brings to the community. So I know the Arts Wells Festival a lot better, so I'll speak a little bit on the benefits that brings to that community and compared to the one that Seth organizes in this riding. But the benefit that brings to the Wells community during Arts Wells is incredible. It is their one large event, it's what people know them for, and all of their tourism is based around that culture. And I think that it's incredibly important to make sure that we have a thriving, society in our communities that is driven by culture, and make sure that artists and others are able to thrive and feel welcomed into their community. And it's not just a, one focused town. It's not just forestry or just mining. We need to make sure that everyone can make sure that they can make a living in their community regardless if they want to be a musician or a forester. And the benefits that can bring can be financial, but that can also be societal, and making sure that we have happy people and we're not just basing our happiness in our communities off of GDP. And that's something that we need to change in our country, in our world, in our province, is to look at how we measure success, because I think that culture is a huge way that we can measure success and happiness, and not just by GDP.
And how do we do this, especially during COVID, when we can't get in girl arts groups or go out and see people generally as like we used to?
I mean, Arts Wells was canceled, and other festivals as well have been, and that's taking a hard hit on cultural associations and events and things like that are in our community. So I think we need to make sure that those that are in power are prioritizing making sure that organizations like this one are still supported and don't go under during times of COVID. We need to make sure that we're not just prioritizing helping large companies during COVID, but we're also helping small artisan shops in tiny villages. We need to make sure that everyone is thought about, not just the select few. During COVID times it's tough, but we need to make sure that we can connect digitally is a great example, making sure that we can safely socially distance and maybe have a small 20-person gathering of an outdoor live concert, just to make sure that everyone is still feeling connected and not isolated. I know especially with seniors right now it's very difficult. I live with my grandma, and COVID was really, really hard because she couldn't go out for dinner, and those were her outings, right? So we need to make sure that we have a loneliness plan in place, and mental health is included in our healthcare, and that is something that the Green Party is very passionate about, and I'm proud to talk about that in my platform. And I think that connects to what we do during COVID times, because things are really difficult right now, and digitally is a great example of ways that we can solve that problem, but not everyone is online either. So we need to, especially in small communities that don't have great connectivity. So we need to focus on connectivity, but in the meantime figure out ways to connect people if they're not online either, in a safe possible way, if they're comfortable. So I think thinking outside of the box, getting creative, and making sure that community organizations have the support from governments to fund small events or whatever it may be, right? Just to keep their facilities open while we wait for the recovery to start.
Thank you. Last question. There's a lot of rhetoric lately about urban-rural divide in the province, and it's very real. They don't have the same access to things everywhere you are. And how can government give people access to arts and culture and other things when they're in small communities? Because we do not have the same access, we do not have the same internet, we don't have healthcare services, and it connects to everything.
I mean, it's not a one size fits all. It's not going to be a one bullet solution or whatever you want to call it. I think we need to figure out what each community needs and have elected representatives that are willing to listen to each community and figure out what they need. Because myself and others, we don't have all the answers. We don't know what's best for each community based on connectivity, based on population, based on what they have been doing in the past before COVID. And now with rural-urban divide, I mean, I grew up on a farm just outside of Prince George for most of my life, and before that I lived in the Yukon, and so I definitely understand the challenges with connectivity that can come from living in a rural area. And I think making sure that connecting people with either arts and culture or other things is a top priority for people that can help them. So if there is funding that we can get from the province for this kind of thing, for arts and culture in general, and to make sure that rural communities can still celebrate with their communities in a safe way, and make sure that even though they don't have a giant CN center like Prince George, they're still able to host their events in a way that everyone is welcomed and accessible, making sure that the facilities that we're hosting our events, there are funds available in our province to prioritize that, but right now we don't really have the political will to look beyond the short-term profits of industry. So we need someone, we need elected officials that are willing to broaden their scope a little bit and look at all of the things in this province that are important, not just the select few that we've kind of seen in the past. Because there has been definitely a narrow view in my mind of, you know, making sure that some industries thrive and others have fallen short, and we see that with, you know, small mills closing between here and Prince George, and for the past 20 years or so, we need to make sure that those are able to operate again, and that can start with forestry. That's something I'm very passionate about, because I believe when we reopen small mills to do value-added products, people will come back into your community, and then you'll be able to, you know, have a bigger tax base to fund those programs, right? So I think it all starts with making sure that we have the political will of someone that is willing and able to look at things in a different light and challenge the old way of doing things, and that's what I'm hoping to do.
So you're fairly versed in small town culture and how it's different than in the city.
I have a lot to learn still, but I did grow up with that experience. I didn't grow up in town, so yep, I definitely felt that in the Yukon. You can't go anywhere without running into someone that you know, and everyone always knows your business, which there's pros and cons to that.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I think it's incredibly important. Like, I grew up in Dawson City, and they have a music festival up there, and that one event every year brought so much like financial help to the community to make sure that we could stay thriving during the winter time when no one wanted to go up there when it was minus 50, and our grocery stores could stay open, and you know, our museums and things like that could thrive. So I think that, you know, it's all very connected to how we manage our land base and how we manage our resources that we have, because we need to make sure that we're managing them for long-term sustainability so that our communities can thrive in the long term, not just a short-term boom and bust that we've seen in the past. So, yeah.
Thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad to be able to travel across the province.
All the way from Prince George.
Yeah. On my way to Valemount, yep. Awesome, well, thank you so much.
And final thing, is there anything we discussed that you would like to expand upon?
I think there is so many things that we could talk about. There's so many things right now. I mean, I just really want to focus on creating resilient communities so that we are able to recover from things like COVID when they happen, make sure that we have food security in small communities so that we aren't just relying on imported food and we're not shipping our raw logs out. Like, the whole system is backwards right now. We need to focus more on making sure that our communities are resilient to climate change and things like that are already here. So there is, a lot of things that I want to focus on. The one thing that, you know, I will mention is we need accountability in government right now, and the Greens can give that, and they have the track record of doing that for the past 3 years and across the country where Greens have been elected. And we can, you know, make policies better that the other parties bring forward. We can amend them, make sure that, you know, everyone is thought about when we're passing these bills and policies, and we're not just focusing on the select few. We're actually thinking about small communities and not just, you know, CEOs of large companies. So I think we need to get back to our roots and make sure that everyone feels supported, and we have an elected representative that is willing to challenge the status quo and, you know, move us in a new direction to recover and transition into a new economy. So, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.